My name's Luke, and welcome to another Dark Hole. This week, I saw X-Men Apocalypse. The sixth in the X-Men series tells the story of the first mutant, Nur, as he comes back to life and threatens all humanity and actually mutant kind as well, which puts the X-Men as the only people who can stop him. Overall, the movie's pretty fun. I mean, it's fine. With these movies, I try not to let my lifelong love of the X-Men get in the way of judging them, but in a little bit, it does. So, just sticking to the good stuff, I mean, taking cues from X-Men First Class, which took place in the 60s, and Days of Future Past, which half took place in the 70s, this one takes place squarely in the 80s. And the production design does a really great job of supporting that. Overall, visually it's good, it's what you'd expect from an X-Men movie. The action is great, which is what you'd expect from an X-Men movie, especially now that they've got a really big budget behind it. And the acting is fantastic. I mean, there's really too many people to name, but even the people who don't get a lot to do a lot with it. So, as I said up top, I am a lifelong X-Men fan. I grew up reading Silver Age X-Men and loved them because they were fun and they had a point and they were great. That said, comic books are a visual medium, so I do not need a direct representation or retelling of existing stories. I like that comic book movies take bits and pieces from different stories and do their own interpretations of them. That said, my biggest problem with all of the X-Men movies is that when it comes to the characters that they use, most of them are only the character in name. Now, I try to set that aside as much as I can when I watch these movies because I accept that that's just what they do. But as a lifelong comic book fan, it sort of drives me crazy because, well, they just sort of grab characters and then just stick random personalities on them, which just sort of defeats the purpose of using them. And this movie does that a lot. I mean, okay, so Apocalypse's portrayal is changed up a bit, and I was 100% okay with that. I mean, it sort of doesn't help that even in the comics, his powers are really nondescript and just sort of, he can just sort of do everything. So, unfortunately, that bleeds over a lot into a lot of aspects of this movie. So, in here we get Angel, just because in the comics, Archangel was a very popular one of the Horsemen and one of my personal favorites. But he's just a guy with wings, really wasted. And then we get Storm in there as a Horseman for some reason. And then we get Psylocke for some reason. And then we get Magneto, which is the only one that really makes sense. But unlike in the comics, where all the characters who are chosen as horsemen are sort of relevant to the four horsemen, war, death, famine, pestilence, here it's just sort of, hey, we need some mutants, let's use these four. Which is sort of fine, but ultimately it just feels like they're stuck in to be stuck in there. And, okay, so Apocalypse's thing for when he chooses his horsemen is he takes their existing powers and he enhances them. But in here, aside from turning Storm's hair white, which it should have been white the whole time, but again, nitpicking, and giving Angel metal wings, you don't really see a whole lot of what he does to enhance them. It's really kind of a letdown. But on another note of letdowns, Quicksilver is one of my favorite characters in the comics. And he was great in the last movie. But I do have a major problem with him because he's Quicksilver in name only. I mean, there's a really great sequence with him. But I just can't. I can accept it. I can get along with it. I can enjoy it. But what is being portrayed on screen is not someone who can run really, really fast. it's showing a guy who can manipulate time around him. Minor nitpick, but that's what it is, and it does bother me a little because of the whole we're going to use a character but not really use the character thing. Sticking with Quicksilver for a moment, the action sequence with him that is fantastic. Actually, there's two. We're talking about the first one. That scene, it sort of shows one of the big problems with this movie in that it can't really keep a tone. It's sort of all over the place. I mean, Quicksilver's scene comes right when something really, really, really dramatic happens and just immediately becomes kind of goofy. I mean, it's super heroic, super cool, but overall it's kind of silly and it really downplays the seriousness of the situation. Another big problem of this movie is the editing is absolutely atrocious. Mostly in the beginning and mostly at the end. It just sort of hops all over the place. I mean, we go from a story of Mystique saving Nightcrawler to Charles Xavier to Moira McTarget, back to Mystique and Nightcrawler, and it's always bouncing back and forth between day and night. I mean, they're all on different parts of the world, but it's very jarring and just looks bad. It's bad visual storytelling. I mean, even the big cameo, trying to say spoiler free here, the big cameo lasts just a little too long, especially the end of it. I mean, it's cool and all, but just, it could have been cut down a lot, and the ending is really unnecessary other than to just sort of try to tie it back into the other movies a little bit. So there's that, and then just some really, really, really dumb dialogue. Who's turning the keys? It's the men! That's an actual line of dialogue. So I know I sound like I'm just trashing it a lot, but overall I enjoyed it. It was fine. I'm not going to be in any hurry to see it again, but I can say that about all of the X-Men movies, and I really liked X2. But I never find myself wanting to watch it again. If you've liked all the X-Men movies, go see it. You'll like this one too. It's fine. It does nothing wrong. It is what it is. And it's pretty good overall, aside from, I mean, the technical stuff is just things that I see because that's how my brain works, and I'm a dope. Okay, follow me on Twitter, FeltLuke, and check out my writing over on nerdson.xyz, where we have podcasts and some articles, and we're slowly starting to get ramped up on that. And it's a pretty good time, just nerd stuff. And until next time, I apologize for nothing.